Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. My name is JDavis, and I am host of Radio Entrepreneurs, and we continue to stream stories of entrepreneurship and leadership in this economy and promote them and provide them for you on our 8 streaming services. And every week we like to check in because you cannot be in business and not understand the law with Mark Furman, director and shareholder at Tarlow, Breed and Rodgers for the segment Entrepreneurship and the Law. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi, Jeffrey. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. And I hope the ball is going straight for you down that fairway every time you hit it.
Fairways always. Wanted to talk a little bit about First Amendment case. It's kind of a unusual situation where police raided a local newspaper out in Kansas, and they had this raises significant First Amendment concerns. Free press and is a huge part of our society, and the press is always controversial, but they play an important role in our democracy. And so there's all these confidentiality issues, whether this is designed to chill the newspaper from investigating certain stories. There's certain unfavorable coverage of some local event. But the fundamental issue is, whether the police, under what circumstances should the police be actually engaging in a search of the computer records and everything else of a newspaper. This is a small weekly paper, but there was tremendous nationwide reaction to this, negative reaction. And in fact, now the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the state version of the FBI, is now begun a criminal probe of the police raid of the newspaper office and whether it was justified or not. And this shows kind of the nerve, the importance of the First Amendment and how people react to it. And it seems to be, the First Amendment's being talked about a lot. This is one of the defenses that the former president, Trump, is talking about, that, he had a First Amendment right to say things that he said, not just in 2020, but today.
About judges and attorneys.
About judges, attorneys, co-defendants, potential witnesses. And, how do you draw the line? The First Amendment is not absolute.
And can I just add one other twist to this before you give us an opinion?
Sure.
I think to add to all this drama, and I've been watching it and I find it very intriguing, is the fact that the publisher's mother, who owned the paper, died the day after the raid. And he blames her death, the publisher, on the stress of this situation. So that only complicates this whole situation.
Right. I mean, she was 98, but, the idea of a police raid on a local newspaper, that's not a story I ever recall reading about before, Jeffrey. It's
only in Europe in 1936, 37, 38.
Yes, and indeed, the editor of the paper described it as Gestapo tactics, according to an article that I read. And, there's a lot of press freedom organizations. There's a Committee for Freedom of the Press, which has urged the return of the seized materials. And, there are federal laws, and many states have laws that protect journalists. And then, of course, there's a constitutional right to against unreasonable searches and seizures, and this all comes into kind of a debate I think we're having nationwide about the First Amendment, and how free should people be to be able to, whether you're a reporter or a speaker. We've had incidents at universities where speakers have been allegedly intimidated or not allowed to speak. I read an article in a paper this morning about that was co-written by Harvey Silverglade, who's a civil liberties strong proponent of the First Amendment, about not making an offer to a college professor because of views that were expressed by the applicant. We have an issue of when people can be liable for petitioning the government. When they speak to the government, when should they be liable? There are limitations. The classic is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not exercising your First Amendment rights. If there's no fire, that's going to cause a panic. But, for every easy case, there's a lot of cases that are in a more difficult area, more gray area. So, but the importance of a free press, even when the powers that be don't like it, don't like what's being reported, is kind of, classic First Amendment. There's a balancing. We've had cases where do journalists have the right to withhold from police their sources of information? They get information from informants, and a lot of times it's under the condition they obtain the information on the condition that it be kept confidential. For those of us of a certain age who remember Watergate, there was Deep Throat, who was furnishing information to Bernstein and Woodward about the inner workings of the Nixon White House, and that led to ultimately the resignation of President Nixon. So, how important is it for there to be a free press as opposed to a press that exists at the whim of the government, that can be closed down at any time?
And we're dealing with a fraction of the reporters in the United States that we had just 20 years ago, because the press has been squeezed. Internet has changed the press. What we consider to be research on stories, local papers are not local papers anymore. And that's the lifeblood of America, are these local independent papers. And if they start feeling that they're going to get closed down if they write the wrong story, or if somebody down the street calls their friend in the police station because they don't like a story, where are we headed? I don't have to say I have to like every story. I do believe in free speech, even when I don't like what I hear.
Yeah, I mean, if should the press be let's take the example of a small local newspaper like this one. Does the paper have a right to be more than a cheerleader for town officials? Can it be critical? Can it spotlight issues that they think are wrong? Perhaps wrongdoing, perhaps not, but unfair, unjust, and can they report on it? Or should they be limited to happy talk? And that makes the town fathers and mothers happy with what's being reported. Our society, publishing critical pieces of political figures goes back to the birth of our country. And of course, now it's probably more vigorous and more polarized, but because there are more sources, and it's easy for people to end up in an echo chamber where they hear a particular slant as opposed to having diverse viewpoints. So, I'm like you, Jeffrey, I'm a fan of the ability to speak, and for newspapers to speak out, journalists speak out. There are limits. We have the settlement with the Dominion company that occurred that related to publishing claims that were made by certain folks about the machines being unreliable and part of some conspiracy. But a free press, to me, is a fundamental to a free society.
And I want to add to that, Mark, and make the lateral move. There's a lot of research to back up what I'm going to say, that organizational employees don't give their bosses their full, honest answers to things, that they realize who signs their paycheck, and that their credit cards and their mortgages and their college payments for their families are all dependent on the perception of them by the people above them. And building honesty into organizations, just like countries, is critical. And it's not an easy thing to do when there's only one person that you can answer to. That's not a democracy. All organizations are participative dictatorships if run properly. And I think too, I go into organizations, you know this, you see this too as a litigator, where there has not been honesty in organizations. And it's amazing when people find out the truth. And you need to build that into all parts of our society to be productive and to grow. And I just want to add that. And it's been an important part of both our careers, I believe.
That's true.
So, Mark, if somebody's looking for you, if somebody wants honesty in their organization, how would they find you?
I can be most readily reached by email, Furman, Furman, at tbhr-law.com.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, Mark, on Radio Entrepreneurs.